It looks like just another tree on a beach in Florida. But when raindrops hit its leaves, something deadly happens. The sap turns the water toxic enough to blind anyone caught beneath. The Manchineel is not just the world's most dangerous tree, even its fruit is called the little apple of death. How can standing under a tree change your life forever? A botanist stands at the edge of a coastal thicket, gloves pulled tight and a face shield in place. The Manchineel tree towers above, its bark a reddish grey and its leaves glossy, edged with fine serrations. Before collecting any material, the botanist inspects the ground for fallen fruit, careful not to touch anything bare-handed. Every part of this tree contains a milky latex, a sap loaded with forbol esters and other irritants. Even a brush against the leaves can leave a chemical burn. To safely gather samples, the botanist uses long-handled clippers to snip a small branch, making sure to avoid any droplets of sap that bead along the cut. The latex seeps out almost instantly, a stark white against the green. A sterile container is held open by an assistant who wears protective goggles and a lab coat. The branch is sealed inside, labeled with date, location, and specimen number. Throughout the process, the team wears full protective equipment, nitrile gloves, splash-resistant coveralls, and face shields. No skin is exposed. The sap's danger is not just a rumor, it is a proven hazard, and the safety gear is non-negotiable. Once the sample is secured, tools are wiped down with alcohol and gloves are removed carefully, inside out, to avoid any contact with residual latex. The sample will be transported to a lab for analysis, but here in the field, the first rule is simple: respect the tree or risk the consequences. Inside a sterile laboratory, a toxicologist examines a sealed branch collected from the Manchineel tree. The first step is a chemical extraction. Droplets of sap are diluted in a controlled solution and injected into a high-performance liquid chromatograph. The machine separates each compound by molecular weight, producing a series of sharp peaks on a digital readout. The tallest spikes represent forbol esters, specifically 12-deoxy-5-hydroxy-forbol derivatives known for their blistering effects on skin and mucous membranes. To understand the real-world hazard, the toxicologist simulates a tropical rainstorm. Pure water is dripped over a fresh Manchineel leaf. The runoff is collected and analyzed. Within minutes, the sample registers forbol concentrations over 200 micrograms per milliliter, a level that far exceeds the threshold for ocular irritation documented in toxicology literature. Even a single drop at this strength can trigger acute conjunctivitis, corneal ulceration, and severe pain. In laboratory tests, direct exposure to just 10 micrograms per milliliter causes epithelial cell death and inflammation in less than an hour. The toxicologist explains that forbol esters are water-soluble. Rainwater does not dilute the danger, it carries it. When these droplets fall from the leaves, they become an invisible threat. If one lands in the eye, the result can be temporary blindness or, in rare cases, permanent damage to the cornea. The numbers are clear. The Manchineel sap is not just an irritant, but a potent chemical hazard, especially under the cover of a rainstorm. An emergency room physician recalls the arrival of a patient with burning, swollen eyes just hours after a sudden rainstorm on a Florida beach. The patient, a local fisherman, had taken shelter beneath a tree, unaware of the danger overhead. Within minutes, his eyes began to sting and water uncontrollably. By the time he reached the hospital, his eyelids were red and blistered, and he could barely keep his eyes open. The conjunctiva, the thin membrane covering the white of the eye, was inflamed and raw. Corneal staining revealed patchy epithelial damage, and the patient described a sensation like sand grinding beneath his eyelids. The ophthalmologist on call ordered immediate irrigation, flushing the eyes for nearly an hour to remove any remaining toxin. Clinical guidelines recommend irrigation within 6 hours of exposure to limit permanent damage, and topical steroids were prescribed to reduce inflammation. Over the next few days, the patient's vision slowly returned, but the pain lingered. In some cases, corneal ulcers can form, risking permanent scarring and loss of sight. This case, like others documented in Caribbean hospitals, reveals the speed and severity of Manchineel-induced ocular injury and the narrow window for effective treatment. Long before scientists catalogued its dangers, the Manchineel tree was known to the people living along the shores of the Caribbean and Florida. Oral traditions warned of a tree whose fruit, though small and inviting, brought agony to those who tasted it. The Spanish called it manzanilla de la muerte, the little apple of death, a name that spread among sailors and settlers as stories of blistered skin and swollen mouths traveled from port to port. Early explorers recorded encounters with the tree in their journals, describing the pain that followed even the briefest contact with its sap. A historian describes how indigenous groups such as the Taino and Carib recognized the tree's power. They are said to have used its milky latex to tip their arrows, turning a simple wound into a deadly threat. In Florida, tales grew around the Calusa, whose poisoned arrows were rumored to have felled Spanish conquistadors, including the fatal wounding of Juan Ponce de Leon in 1521. Whether myth or fact, these stories reflect a deep-rooted respect and fear for the tree's toxic legacy. Over centuries, warnings were passed down, not just in words, but in the careful avoidance of its shade and fruit, shaping how communities lived alongside this dangerous neighbor. Salt-laden winds batter the Florida Keys, but on the edge of the dunes, Manchineel trees stand firm. Their roots run deep and wide, holding sand in place where other trees would topple. Park rangers describe how these roots knit the shoreline together, forming a living barrier against erosion and storm surge. During hurricane season, when waves pound the coast, the Manchineel's dense root system keeps the beach from washing away. This resilience is why the tree thrives along exposed stretches from the southern tip of Florida through the Bahamas and across much of the Caribbean. A map of its range traces a line along the most vulnerable edges of land, places where hurricanes strike hardest and shifting sands threaten to swallow roads and buildings. Despite its dangers, the Manchineel is a keystone species in these coastal habitats. Rangers explain that removing the trees would leave the land defenseless, so management plans often call for marking or fencing them rather than cutting them down. The tree's presence is a trade-off, a toxic neighbor, but an irreplaceable guardian of the shore. Red X's slash across tree trunks at the edge of the sand, a clear warning to anyone who passes. In Florida and the Caribbean, Manchineel trees are marked with paint or metal signs, each one spelling out the same message: do not touch, do not climb, do not stand beneath the branches, especially during or after rain. Park regulations prohibit eating the fruit, collecting leaves, or burning any part of the tree. Even gathering driftwood is forbidden, since a single stick of Manchineel can turn a campfire into a toxic hazard. Rangers walk the beaches after storms, checking that warning markers remain visible and that no branches have fallen into public areas. Visitors are told to keep well back from marked trees and to never use them for shade, shelter, or firewood. The rules are strict, but the danger is real. Filming crews are required to wear full protective gear, including gloves, goggles, and long sleeves. Any equipment that touches the tree is cleaned with alcohol and sealed away. These precautions are not just for show. Park rangers have seen what happens when people ignore the warnings. The Manchineel's reputation is well earned, and on these beaches, safety comes before curiosity. Even now, Manchineel trees grow along popular beaches, marked by warning signs, yet still misunderstood. As coastal development spreads, the line between danger and daily life keeps blurring. Nature's deadliest lessons do not always look menacing. Sometimes they simply wait for us to let our guard down, stay curious, and be careful.